what if every moment that you feel powerless is really an invitation to see your true nature? What if the very relationships that trigger you the most are a pathway to show you the way home to yourself? Welcome to day 31 of ReWired. I'm Jamie O'Connor, your guide here on 365 days of practices to rewire your brain for miracles for the spiritually curious high achiever. And today we're exploring a transformative truth. You are not a victim of the world you see. I'm going to take a moment and think about those experiences where you feel like you are on a loop of the same patterns. Maybe you're encountering one of those moments where you feel like you have done the work. Why are you here again? Why has this shown up again? Often when we have started to dive into deeper work, which if you're here, if you are attracted to this video, then you are no newbie to self-awareness and doing deeper work. And sometimes we can get into this space that I like to call the pink cloud. Things feel really good. You did the deep work. You looked at patterns, you changed them, you transformed them, and man, life got really good for a little while there. And then we show up to this place where we end up in the same loop, or at least it feels like the same loop we've been on before. And we wonder, how did we get here? How did we let ourselves get so far off track? But what we fail to realize in those moments is that you're not on the same loop. You're riding a spiral and you're in continuous expansion. When you're pulled back into that phase that often can feel like contraction, it is a new opportunity for growth. It's a wayfinding sign. It's a pathway deeper into yourself. Now, when we find ourselves in these loops, it can feel a bit like drama. And maybe you haven't gotten yourselves out of the drama and you still like the chaos a little bit. I know that I can definitely get dragged back there. I was the epic, most amazing chaos creator in my life. And it was very easy to be a chaos creator and blame other people. You see, chaos was what was comfortable for me. It is the place that I felt most at home because that was home for me growing up. Chaos, addiction, alcoholism, codependency, narcissism, you name it, it was in my house. And I was the oldest daughter. I was an expert at getting involved in the drama. And in that, I would often feel the need to be savior to my mom, savior to my sisters. And I was often victim and felt as though I landed in the worst place. How could my mom do this to me, treat me this way? How could my dad continue to drink? How could my sister chase me with scissors? Whatever it was. And though we never like to admit it, I have absolutely been perpetrator, judge. Now, what am I talking about? I am bringing into this lesson today a really incredible model, a coaching model, a psychological model that I learned years ago when I started working in the coaching space, which is the drama triangle. Now, you may have heard of it before. And if you have, I hope this brings you back to it. And if you haven't, let me introduce you to one of the most transformative models that I have ever seen. This is one of the most foundational pieces I bring back as often as I can when I find myself in emotional territories I swore I would never end up in again. whether that's with family, with employees, with friends, with my kids, with their teachers. There's an abundance of places that this shows up all the time. And what I've come to understand through both profound spiritual journey and raw human experience is that these moments in time, these experiences, they're not punishment. They're not even evidence that something is wrong. They're invitations to see more deeply into the nature of our relationships with others and with ourselves, and ultimately with the divine. And so let me introduce you to the drama triangle. Whenever we find ourselves in places of conflict, which we've been talking about a lot in the last 30 days, emotional strife and conflict. And now I want to give you a tool that is actionable, something that can help you recognize where you may be, recognize that you may be playing a role, and allow yourself to move out of it without shame. In the drama triangle, if you find yourself in emotional conflict, then you are likely playing one of three roles. You're either playing the victim, the rescuer or the savior, or the persecutor or the judge. Those three roles are happening at all times when drama is happening, when conflict is happening. And within a period of conflict, you may end up in any one of those roles and then moving to another. Think about any time you have been in a deep conflict with somebody. Often we find ourselves in one of these roles, and we tend to have a pattern towards one or the other. I find high achievers have a tendency to land in one of two more often than others. Usually, savior and rescuer, or persecutor and judge, is the place we land the most. And we use this self-awareness and ability to see our part, especially if we do a lot of deep inner work, to generally stay away from the victim role. But come on, we're all emotional and we all have felt like a victim many, many times. So how often have you stepped into the role of savior or rescuer, taking away somebody else's capability of taking care of themselves? I know I've done this a million times with employees. It was one of the things that kept me from my next level of growth in my last business, because I spent hundreds of thousands to clean up the operations and make sure that everything could run very smoothly. And yet somehow I ended up putting out all the fires all the time. Interesting. It wasn't until I hired yet another operations consultant that ended up being one of my greatest friends and mentors in coaching that came in, observed everything, and then after 3 weeks of observation and looking at all of the systems that we had built, he came to me and said, Jamie, I figured out what's wrong. You are the problem. Luckily, by this point, I had done enough work. I was able and willing to hear this. And over 10 weeks of working with him, I came to see how my right-hand person who'd been with me since the day I decided to start my marketing agency and sat with me at my kitchen table was someone that for about a year I had been putting in the role for me to save, that I felt obligated and that she needed me. If I did not give her gainful employment, then she would not survive. I was the reason she got out of whatever miserable situation I was telling myself she was in before, only to realize once I made the decision to step out of savior role that I had been holding her back from her biggest potential, her ability to grow into who she was meant to be. And we were playing this dance that looked a lot like mother and daughter, and honestly, a lot like the relationship I had with my mother. It's amazing how this shows up in our world and our life. Business and leadership often is a doorway to the deeper work. That's just one example that I have in my life, and I have played victim so many times. In that situation in particular, I often fell into victim because I was constantly saving and putting out the fires, and then constantly feeling like, why is this happening to me? And then would quickly move into judge and persecutor, not being a leader, but adding shame and blame throughout my organization. I still catch myself doing this today with my family and other places. But now I can recognize it. I can take a moment and notice where I'm stepping into that role, be willing to see, and then take an active step out of it. So I'm going to go into actually how to step out of this from the coaching perspective, and then we'll go into today's daily practice. So when you find yourself in the role of rescuer and you have become willing to see the role you're playing, and you realize that you are in the role of rescuer, your next step is to step into coach. How do you be willing to see that the person has their own ability and capability to help themselves, and you need to step out of enabling and pain relieving, saying, I know I can fix this for you. Let go of your fear that if you don't fix this, you are not needed, and step into coach, a person who can empower somebody else. Start to facilitate questions, asking for clarity, asking the person to find a solution, bring it to you, and that you're willing to collaborate if they want it. Be willing to step aside, not be the one to have the idea, yet be the one to hold the container for the idea to flourish. And learn to have a boundary. We'll go much deeper into loving boundaries in future lessons. Now, if you find yourself in victim, where you feel like, why is this happening to me? How could this happen to me? You feel like a dream has been lost or denied to you for some reason, where you feel powerless over the situation. This is where you step into creator. You take action. You own the power that you have to choose and to respond. And you take one small step in creation, whatever that looks like. One small step in action. So the moment that you feel like victim, this is the moment that you ask yourself, what small step can I take right now? And be careful that that small step is not taking a step toward perpetrator, that it's not taking a step in retaliation or revenge, but in a step of self-will, self-empowerment, and self-authorship, that you own the story. Now, if you find yourself in persecutor, you are describing the problem at hand, finding somebody to blame, tearing down others, maybe shaming. This one can be the hardest to recognize that you are in, because the shame is deep when we realize we may be the one hurting somebody else. This is where we evoke our challenger, We move from calling out to calling up. This is where we start to ask how we all can align with the vision we want to move towards. And if we can, be willing to see that there are parts that you played in all of this and step into encourager and cheerleader. Now, all of this comes from the empowerment triangle. So we talked about the drama triangle by Stephen Cartman, and this is the empowerment triangle that is by David Emerald. So just for reference point of what those are from. Now, how do we take the first step? The first step is being willing to see. Sound familiar? So we want to start our day just setting an intention. I am willing to see myself and others beyond these roles. I am willing to see myself and others beyond these roles. Take some deep breaths, center yourself in your body, and recognize that setting an intention at the beginning of the day sets the tone. This is the theme for the day. I'm willing to see myself and others beyond these roles. Now, as you keep an open mind through the day, allow the moments to come in where you suddenly realize you may be playing one of these roles. Whenever you feel a tinge of emotional conflict, you feel a moment of tension, take a step back and ask yourself, what role am I playing? What if this moment is inviting me to see differently? What role am I playing? What in this moment is inviting me to see differently? If you'd like to add in 3 times today of intentional practice, where you can search your mind for opportunities to see the role you've been playing, where you may have played different roles in specific situations. I encourage you to do that for a minute or 2, focusing on just one situation each time. Do this by finding a quiet space, taking 3 to 5 deep breaths, slowly in, and then out twice as long as you let in, and allowing your mind to calm, releasing any shame, asking it to bring up an example so you can see what roles you've been playing. And then one final step, if you'd like to take it, is asking what truth is trying to emerge from this pattern. What truth is trying to emerge from this pattern? Allow yourself to hold compassion for yourself. Becoming aware of our roles, conscious of what we do, it doesn't mean that everything changes overnight. In fact, you're going to revisit these throughout your life, but you're going to become more conscious of it, more aware, and more steeped in the place of love. And the more you do that, the more you start to open up to the inspiration, to the miracles, and you see the miracles inside of the relationships. They become the mirrors of all that is possible in your life. So thank you for showing up. I know this lesson was a little bit longer and I appreciate it. This is one of the greatest tools that you can use in your life, in your leadership. And I appreciate you taking the time to learn it with me. If you've stumbled upon this video somewhere on the internet or the audio, you have come across ReWired. It is 365 days of daily videos and emails that come to your inbox to help you rewire your brain for co-creation and miracles and truly stepping into your deepest and highest self. If you'd like to get these daily reminders or have the opportunity to join an accountability community, please go to inspiredfocus.link/rewired. Thank you for joining me. I'll see you tomorrow for day 32.